We all have patterns of energy from our past that we may be unaware of. These patterns can manifest as circumstances and situations in our lives. Shadow work is the process of understanding these patterns and integrating them into our conscious awareness. It is a powerful tool for personal growth and transformation. If you want to live your life to the fullest, it is important to do shadow work. By understanding your shadow, you can become more aware of your strengths and weaknesses. If you want to live your life to the fullest, it is important to do shadow work. By understanding your shadow, you can become more aware of your strengths and weaknesses. You can also learn to accept and integrate all aspects of yourself, both the light and the dark. Shadow work might seem a bit spooky at first, but in reality, it's just about exploring every part of you, especially the parts tucked away in your subconscious mind. The word shadow actually comes from a man named Carl Jung, who was a remarkable psychologist and a student of Freud. Jung found out that we have heaps of energy patterns from our past hidden within us, resonating inside us even when we don't know it. These hidden patterns act like energy waves, shaping events and situations in our lives. So, shadow work is all about getting to know what's really happening to us. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. Furthermore, it is constantly in contact with other interests, so that it is continually subjected to modifications. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected. Now, the shadow has two sides, what we may call the light shadow and the dark shadow. The light shadow is all about the parts of us that are amazing, potential skills, talents, and gifts we have inside us, just waiting to be found. Now, not every talent is meant for us, but we've all got some special skills and gifts hiding inside us. We can find these by doing what we love, listening to our intuition, going with what feels good, and chasing what makes us truly happy. When you follow these paths, that's when you'll encounter your light shadow. As you start to uncover and embrace this light shadow in your life, you'll start to feel more complete, more whole, and more full of life. In fact, a pretty good way to know if you're living with your light shadow is to ask yourself, how lively are you? How thrilled about life are you? If you're really stoked about life and bursting with passion, that's a good sign your light shadow is shining through. If you're not feeling that excitement, it's time to discover that part of you. Now, the dark shadow. That's the parts of us that are holding us back. Things like repressed feelings, bad decisions from the past, things we don't want to think about, a lot of it from when we were just kids. Maybe a teacher said something hurtful, or our parents, or a friend. We've buried these things so deep because they're too painful to even think about. So they end up in what we call the dark shadow, still full of this pulsating energy. However, this dark shadow, just like the light shadow, is a powerhouse of energy, and it draws in people, situations, and experiences that match those vibrations, that energy wave. So when you're doing shadow work, you want to ask yourself, what have I pushed down and ignored? Now, patterns are like the subconscious mind's fingerprints. If you've got events that keeps happening over and over, like maybe you're always the one to walk away from relationships, or you're always getting rejected. Your relationships just aren't panning out well. Why does it keep happening? Well, it is difficult to be fully objective, but it is a pattern, isn't it? Whenever you see patterns like this, it's a clear sign from your subconscious mind. It's part of the shadow. It's the same with financial struggles. Maybe you've tried many different ways to get ahead financially, but none of them are working. That's a pattern too. Or maybe you're always catching a cold or feeling sick and you just can't seem to ever recover. That's another pattern. Whenever you notice these patterns, it's a piece of your shadow. What you want to do with shadow work is get a good look at your shadow. And the way to do that is by doing a bit of personal digging like an archaeologist. We know that the wildest and most moving dramas are played not in the theater, but in the hearts of ordinary men and women who pass by without exciting attention, and who betray to the world nothing of the conflicts that rage within them except possibly by a nervous breakdown. What is so difficult for the layman to grasp is the fact that, in most cases, the patients themselves have no suspicion whatever of the internecine war raging in their unconscious. There are many methods and techniques that you can use to investigate your subconscious mind, so you can start to figure out what that shadow part of you is, especially if it's the dark shadow that's getting in the way. And here's the cool part. Once you manage to get a glimpse of the shadow, you'll be surprised to see how delicate it really is. And it's not as grim or intimidating as we might think, because once we spot our shadow, we acknowledge it. And then you can change it. The remarkable thing about the power of the mind is that you can switch any life pattern into something else. So, when you recognize the shadow part of you that's creating these patterns, it all comes down to mind power. That's why we're always encouraging the idea that every one of us has the potential to nurture and improve our mental strength. By harnessing the power of your mind through training, you can turn any aspect of your shadow self that's obstructing your path into its exact counterpart, making it beneficial for you. But you need to identify it first. Also, it's essential to deeply love yourself. No room for judgment. That's the prime rule in shadow work. Never pass judgment on yourself because we often put too much pressure on ourselves. We fail to understand that the sense of not being good enough is a collective sentiment. It's prevalent in everyone. We mistakenly believed it was just us. Thus, we tend to avoid confronting those aspects of ourselves that we believe are not up to the mark. Yes, every part of you has value. Every aspect of yourself needs to be acknowledged, even your spitefulness, even your trivial concerns, and even the parts of you that don't function as they should. They are all integral to who you are. And when you accept them, shadow work is all about embracing these aspects and deeply loving yourself. You know what? We're not perfect. Move past it. One way to think about it is, we are delightfully imperfect. It's our shortcomings as well as our skills that shape our identity. Accept it. That's what shadow work is all about. And shadow work is incredibly interesting and worthwhile. The enlargement of the light side of consciousness has the necessary consequence that the part of the psyche which is less light and less capable of consciousness is thrown into darkness to such an extent that sooner or later a rift occurs in the psychic system. At first, this is not recognized as such and is therefore projected. That is, it appears as a religious projection, in the form of a split between the powers of light and darkness. If this message reverberates within you, this next video may be helpful on your journey to self-knowledge.